So on the fill, I should be able to, it's grayscale fill, but there should be textures and procedurals here that I can just grab. Um, so I should be able to drag one of these in. Let's use that. Okay, perfect. So that was my bad. It's because I was adding a black mask, and a black mask will just fill the whole black mask. So any filter that I added below it was just affecting a completely black mask. I do need a fill on the mask in order to add some texture variation, which this allows me to do. So there's some texture variation in there. We can control how much shows up and how little. So you kind of want some of it. Let's add a little bit more contrast on there. We can invert it as well if you want to invert it depending on the look. But more importantly, we have the blur slope. Let me just get rid of that. So if I add the blur slope filter, so you should be able to see the difference. I want it above. Cool. There we go. So it looks like it's working. I don't know if people can see that. So if I turn it on and off, it went from like a very speckled looking grunge filter, but with the blur slope, it blurs things into chunks that look quite painterly. Does that work for people? You can also control the intensity of the blur slope. You probably want a lower intensity to have the kind of speckled look. Um, and you can control the variations with the intensity divider. So once we have that, can people see the blur slope stuff? Is it too, do I need to increase the contrast on it? Okay, good stuff. Uh,
Oh, I see it now. So,
okay, that all right? All right, so then I'm going to keep adding filters. So the filters, the basic filters that we're using is so the grunge just gives it like it's a it's a it's a black mass. We're adding a fill, so the grunge just gives it some texture to work with. So it's not just pure black. So that was where I was going wrong. Uh, then you add the blur slope. The blur slope filter will basically chunkify whatever texture you have and make it look like splotches, which is what we want. Now we're going to add the blur directional, which again, if I turn this on and off, hopefully you can see, it kind of blurs it directionally so it looks like brushstrokes. I don't know if that's showing through. You can change the angle of it here. And finally, I can add a filter for sharpen. And depending on my intensity of the sharpen, that makes it a lot more of a, I guess, like uh, jaggedy brushstrokes, or the less sharpened it is, the more blended it looks. Okay, and then all I need to do is grab the opacity and drop it down so it doesn't look like pure white, and we have variations. And whatever is in this color here will be the color that's painted. So like this could be red, for example, and now it looks like it's an orange with some like splotches of red painted on it. So essentially what they did in the video was multiple layers of this. So you could, let's just duplicate this. And on this one, let's make it like, and let's change the pattern here so you can change the scale of it. So it applies across a larger area. You can rotate it and even offset it so they don't just apply on top of each other. And the same with the blur slope. You can tweak on each different layer the intensity of the variations. Add a new fill layer. Let's do some little what we do, like super light yellow speckles. generator to this mess? Yeah, let's do a fill for now. Can I add a procedural? Because that would be nice. Yep, I can. Great stuff. So I kind of want little speckles, but let's make that so that very few speckles show up. And again, if I want it to look painterly, I'll do the blur slope filter. So all those variations again. So now it looks like it's splotched on. And the blur directional. And finally sharpen if I want sharpen. Cool, and you can kind of see that's how you would build up more colors. And adding kind of like that kind of painterly look on it. I see a question coming in, so let me just hang on for a sec.
Looks very pretty.
Yeah, I believe painterly, stylized or painterly. In this case, I call this painterly more so than stylized. If you really go crazy on the sharpen and the directional, you can do like I don't know if you can see it. It kind of looks like wood streaks almost. Like so, that's how you would make like stylized wood. So that's basically how you would build up more layers. So instead of doing just more copies of the same layers, I'll also show you an apology. I think I should be able to. Okay, so let's do like a little shadow overlay, so like a gradient overlay. So you'll often see, especially with stylized stuff, in 2D painting. Let me see if I can find a example. So you can kind of see from the black and white versions, there's this gradient where stuff on top is lighter and stuff below is darker. So there's like a gradient going up from top to bottom. That's very common with stylized looks. So that's something we can do here as well. We can do it like manually, like we can like literally paint in shadows below. We can, or we can do it like using a generator. So let's make this a black fill layer. It's kind of dark. It's pure black. And let's add a black mask. And I think I need just a generator. And a generator should be able to do a position. Oh, it might ask me to. Will this allow me to do it? Yeah, it allows me to do it. Great stuff. Okay, no, it won't work because it needs these inputs. So these inputs are taken from the model. So you can either generate them yourself in a different program, or Substance will allow us to generate all of them. If I go to the texture set settings and I go down to bake mesh maps, what this will do will be it will bake mesh maps for this mesh. So world space normal basically goes like, here's the world. You can see there's Y is up, X, Z, and it'll control which is up and which is down. The ambient occlusion map, it will check where pieces touch each other, are in contact, and add like a little shadow contact there. I'll show you that in a sec. Curvature map, again, I think we talked about that before, but it checks for angles of change and adds like a curvature on that map. These are all black and white maps. Position map is like what direction it is. Again, it's very similar to the world space normal map. And then we have a thickness map, so which is thick or not. And we can just go bake mesh maps, bake everything for me, please. Just bake it. The default stuff is fine, usually. Just need to wait for it to bake, and then my filter should work now. Awesome. So you can see my filter's working now. It wasn't before, but now because I have input a position gradient and world space normals, that all I did was tell it to bake it. It now can work. So what it does, let me turn off the position. So this was just a completely black fill layer with a black mask, so it doesn't show anything. If I add a position generator, the position generator takes the world position, and you can kind of see it doing there. So like the top of it's getting darker, and it's not on the bottom. So it's controlling the layers based on that position. Now I should be able to invert it. There we go. So the bottom is darker as opposed to the top. And then let us control the blur on that. How far we want that to go up and down. Let's add a bit more blur. And the contrast. And then all I need to do is drop down the opacity so it doesn't just look like it's completely dark. Okay, and maybe let's add that as let's do a linear burn. Doesn't really change much, it's fine. Okay, so that will give me my gradient. Maybe that's a little too much blur. Maybe too much balance as well. Cool. Alright. And let's drop down the opacity more. So just a bit. Cool. So we have a little gradient. Let's do an ambient occlusion one. So let's do a fill layer. And this is where we can bake in our ambient occlusion. Let's make that black as well. Add a black mask. Add a generator. We are going to do an ambient occlusion generator. And you can see that happening. It's using the mask that I baked, that I told it to bake, right there. And again, I can change. So this, I probably need to invert this. Invert, yes. So it's going to add black in those areas. And if I want to make this look like someone painted in the shadows as opposed to be realistic, again, I can add that blur slope as well on top of it. So add the blur slope there. There we go. And you can kind of see that it looks like it's painted. Cool. So let's tweak this a little. Cool, so it looks a little bit more like someone painted in shadows there. And again, with all these things, you kind of want to drop the opacity. You don't want it to be way too much. Like if it's too much, it doesn't look that good. And let's do the directional blur as well. Oh, sorry, not a fill. Filter. So it's a little painted looking. And let's change the angle of that. Cool. And let's sharpen it. Why not? So you can kind of see it's like I'm doing the same thing really over and over. Cool. Right. It's pretty painted there. Cool. And I can also use this to add like edge wear. So if I think we talked about it before. So like on areas where there's sticky out pieces, like things will knock into them and like scrape them, and that's really common. So we want to try to make it look like they're worn away a little bit on those areas. So for that, that's really simple. We will let's add a fill layer. Oh, sorry, that was 2 fill layers. Let's make it wear like maybe a off yellow, something like that. And let's do a generator, which is going to be a curve. Where is curve? Curvature, there. Alright, so you can kind of see where on the areas where it's curved, it is being affected on those areas. If I add contrast higher, you should be able to see. There we go. So it affects like edge areas. So now it looks like, those areas have been knocked a little bit and chipped a tiny bit. And I can also add again, same thing, blur slope again. And now we kind of get a little bit more of a painterly look. Again, another directional blur. Oh, maybe a little less intense than the other ones. And the great thing about this is like they built on top of each other, so I can change how they look like after I've added them. And with always drop down the opacities, it's not all over the top. Cool. So with all of these are only controlling the color at the moment, but you can obviously use them to control anything. So it could be the emission or the metal or the roughness, because all they're doing is affecting this black layer, the black mass layer. So depending on what you put in there, it'll change what you have on the model. Let me just try a thing which I haven't tried before. Let's try to make this. I'm just going to make it green so I can see it. Let's add a black mass. Let's add let's see if I can do a procedural. Awesome, there we go. So that works. So these procedurals, they're just like in there, and you should be able to add them and control how they show up. Trying to get his eye in one of the. So yeah, you can get like some pretty wacky, crazy effects depending on what you have there. Actually, let me put that below. Let me put that just above the original base layer, like so, because I want the other stuff to show up on top of it. So like Sunset Overdrive did something very similar to this. Let's add a little bit of light on top as well. Let's do a light layer. I'm trying to think of any other. I only took Sunset Overdrive because that was the one I remembered. I was trying to think if there's any other similar looking styles. Let's add a light generator. Oh dear. Oh, I put the light generator in the wrong place. Whoops. I need a filter, black mass. Cool. And the light generator will basically pretend generate a light. And what that allows me to do is I can shift the light, so you should be able to see I can shift the angle of the light. But because I'm using it on the mask here, it's as if I'm using it to control, almost as if it's been sprayed with something. So if I try to add the angle so that it's maybe from above, maybe, yeah. So you may, if you want to have it look like it's been spray blasted from a certain angle. So that's what I might do. Can we do a overlay or linear dodge? Nope, doesn't change much. Overlay. Cool, kind of lightens it up a little. Maybe a vivid light. No, just do an overlay. Cool. Okay. So those kind of texture settings maps allow you to use those generators, which are really powerful because they allow you to kind of add all these kind of very cool different. There's even dirt and dripping ones that you can use. Let me try the dirt one. Actually, I have not tried the dirt one. So we're gonna see if I can add. Let me see if I can add an actual dirt material. Let's do concrete. Close enough. Black mask and do a generator. And let's see if I can do that dirt generator. Cool. It's pretty good. So it adds dirt, seems to use the occlusion channel and curvature. Yeah, occlusion and curvature. So it'll add dirt in areas where I guess where there is crevices, would make sense. That's where dirt would collect, which is pretty cool. But we're getting into realistic stuff here, so I guess if we want stylized, we probably wouldn't be adding a dirt layer. Let's do our... And then these only control colors, so if I want to do my usual emission and all that stuff, that would just be a typical normal fill layer. Any questions? Oh, can I make this look like it's painted on? That'd be kind of cool. So let's add a filter. We'll do the blur slope filter. Yeah, look at that. So it looks like it's kind of painted on lightly, which is pretty cool. Yeah, that's pretty good. So it looks like doesn't look like it's just a solid hard edge there. And let's do all the other filters. The directional one, this one a bit less. And we'll sharpen it. So if I go back down here, this is the pink, right? Yeah. So orange. We had orange, red, we had pink. So if I want to add like maybe a light, let me turn off this hand suit, it's getting in the way. So if I want to make it look like it's building up colors, if I add a duplicate of this, so it's a complete duplicate of the layer. And we can do like should be able to do a filter that is a hue saturation, yep, HSL. No, I want the HSL here. So HSL stands for hue saturation, and that will affect the color. So I can run through the hue, and that just shifts the color. So if I'm trying to figure out if I want a certain look or something, I might use this in order to see what it looks like. Let's do the purple. And if I want to, for example, so this is covering the same exact area as the red because that's where I duplicated it from. You can kind of see that. So if I wanted to make this cover kind of the same area but not the same, like less of it, I would add levels. And the levels should control the black and white here. There we go. You can kind of see I'm reducing the amount of area that it's covering. So we kind of get more of a splotchy look. And that's how you would do, I guess, like building up lighter variations. So instead of purple, let's just do, we'll do like a lighter red. So let's add the lightness up. Cool. All right. Not sure I like that, but you know. Cool. All right. So that's pretty much it. After that, you would just render that out. So I've kind of gone for a bit of a way to spray painty look as opposed to a Ghibli look, but hopefully you should be able to see how that would work if you're trying to get a Ghibli look as well. You would just use more realistic base colors, and instead of shifting the upper layer colors as much, like I've gone from orange all the way to like hot pink. So instead of shifting that much, you would shift it less. You would also use a larger blur slope instead of the smaller blur slope. So that would just be by controlling the size of the fill of the mask. Cool. Any other things that people want covered while we're here before we move on next week to like high poly stuff? Can anyone hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
I have no question.
Nothing.
Imagine if the recording cut out and everything went wrong halfway through.
Uh,
No, it's still
Can't
recording.
think of anything.
Okay.